Zur, a low-ranking data analyst from the Zaya Collective, was the first to notice something strange about a modest bureaucratic report that was quietly making its way through the interstellar channels in the center of the Galactic Consortium. It was filed under routine planetary surveys, the kind that no one really paid much attention to until someone did. A fast double-check of figures and an emergency notice to his boss followed what had started as a casual review. Since Earth had been a part of the galaxy for centuries and was primarily known for its strangely overzealous citizens and peculiar customs, as well as a few minor infractions and instances of humans being well human, the consortium initially didn't take the seemingly inconsequential backwater planet from Sector 3492 that had just been classified as a Class 13 death world seriously. Surely, it had to be an error. Class 13 was set aside for planets where even the atmosphere was thought to be hostile to all known forms of life. These planets were completely uninhabitable and definitely not places where a sapient species could survive, but the numbers were not deceiving, and soon after, representatives from all of the consortium's major species were called into an emergency session. They exchanged anxious looks and expressed uncertainty. High Counselor Orcs, a distinguished member of the ferrite species, presided over the meeting in the towering halls of the forum. His elongated form swayed slightly, indicating a clear sign of anxiety among his kind. Whispers is a Class 13 planet. Had humans been hiding the true nature of their world all this time, or worse, were they aware of how dangerous their home truly was? He said, "We have received an alarming report regarding the planet designated Earth. According to recent data, it meets all criteria for the highest possible danger rating a Class 13 death world." His voice cracked through the translation nodes. With its transparent skin shimmering in excitement, a creature from the Valkyrie delegation mumbled to its companions, "That can't be right," as the sentence reverberated throughout the hall and a collective gasp shook the gathering. The consortium was no stranger to death worlds. Planets with high classifications were well documented but were always avoided, sealed off with strict intergalactic laws to prevent any form of accidental exploration. No species had ever intentionally settled on such a planet and survived to tell the tale, but here were humans thriving on a Class 13 world for millennia without even knowing the danger they were in, or perhaps, as some started to whisper, the humans knew all along what exactly makes this planet so dangerous. "I visited Earth. It was humid, yes, but deadly." "No way," Rylock, a reptilian figure from the Mober species, scoffed openly. "Humans live there if they can survive it. How bad can it be?" A Zagra called CLA, one of the more recent members of the forum, inquired as his multi-lens eyes quickly shifted between the displays showing Earth's data, obviously looking for any mistake. There must be a mistake in the categorization of their cities and history since it doesn't make up. Because the planet's atmosphere is unstable and its temperatures vary greatly across various locations, the Counselor Orcs lifted one of his numerous limbs to indicate for quiet. Its flora and wildlife are particularly violent and adapted to the environment, as are any creatures unfortunate enough to encounter them. Natural calamities happen with startling regularity. Rock stopped, still laughing, and said, "Oceans, you mean water, you can't be serious." The creatures. Orcs' eyes narrowed drastically, and their seas were the most violent bodies of water in the known galaxy. A single wave could crush buildings and the creatures who live under the surface. They are able to grow to proportions that nothing outside of our greatest fears can equal, so Orcs kept ignoring him. While some hunt in groups, others hunt alone. Bayhats are all lethal. The sneer of Rylock wavered. He had heard that the aquatic life on Earth was okay, but people were still able to. They have technology, after all, so they're not simply swimming aimlessly through that muck. Many delegates nodded, but the unease persisted because the information wasn't just about natural hazards. There was something unique about Earth that all rational beings in the room struggled to understand. A quiet voice came from the corner, and it was Nal, the Vila representative. Her pale green eyes glistened with interest and a hint of concern. The phrase "thick humans thrive" echoed in the minds of the assembled delegates, each processing it with varying degrees of disbelief. If Earth was indeed a death world of the highest order, then the humans were not just survivors but a product of it. Their resilience and renowned adaptability made sense now, but that realization only raised more troubling questions. Regardless of the adaptations they have made, their very biology is shaped by the constant struggle against this environment. A loud voice yelled out from someplace in the back of the auditorium, "What do we do with them now? Are we safe?" If they had been fashioned by such a deadly planet, what did that make the humans? This was no longer just a classification problem. As the delegates exchanged uncomfortable looks, the unease in the chamber increased. The humans had always been viewed as slightly odd, yes, but no one had ever considered them dangerous. Now that Earth's classification hung over them like a cosmic guillotine, that perspective was changing. The new status of the planet not only changed how the Galactic Consortium thought it knew about humans, but it also called into question everything it believed it knew about them. If they could survive, even thrive on a death world, what else were they capable of? What other secrets had been buried beneath their seemingly innocuous exterior? The delegates were sent back to their home worlds with the most upsetting news they had heard in years. Humans were no longer just an odd species. They were survivors of the deadliest world ever recorded, and nobody quite understood what that meant for the rest of the galaxy. Counselor Orcs took a deep breath, his many eyes narrowing. "We need more information until we know more about what this means, and we will treat Earth with caution." Galactic news outlets were inundated with headlines stating that humans came from Class 13 Death World Earth, the deadliest world we have ever known and possibly the most dramatic of all. Should we be afraid of? The news had barely closed when it began to spread like wildfire throughout the consortium, with every major communication hub buzzing with transmissions, each more frantic and incredulous than the last. The idea that Earth was the most dangerous planet was met with outright disbelief in some parts of the galaxy. Aliens who had dealt with humans for centuries simply couldn't comprehend that these strange, cheerful creatures came from the deadliest rock in the known universe. Take the GR Republic, for instance. During their midday break, a group of dock workers in their capital city of Vuk heard the news. Crow, a burly Grand with 4 arms and a notoriously short fuse, was the first to burst out laughing when he heard the broadcast. Crow laughed so hard he almost choked on his drink. He said, "Humans, those soft, squishy little bipeds who drink liquids that smell like they're made of sulfur, come from a planet that's deadlier than Zakar Prime." His co-workers, a variety of Grands, and other species nodded, their faces divided between amusement and confusion. They couldn't even regenerate limbs, so how could they possibly survive on a Class 13 death world? Crow slammed one of his fists on the table, sending a pile of data pads flying. "They have no exoskeletons or natural armor at all, and if I had to live without my carapace on a world like that, I would be dead in a cycle of laughs." One of his buddies, a lanky nod called ADH, chimed in, his long neck bobbing as he talked. The table, yet it was accompanied with an increasing feeling of uneasiness since, despite their jokes, nobody could dispute the reality that the consortium's data was almost always accurate. Humans had managed to live and prosper on Earth, despite the fact that it was a death planet. Meanwhile, the Reelan Academic Council was gathering on the other side of the galaxy. Even the Romans, who were renowned for their great intelligence and intellectual curiosity, were unable to control their doubt when the topic of Earth's categorization was raised. The likelihood that a sentient species could arise on a planet this hostile is extremely remote, and the sheer number of environmental dangers would make any kind of internet life extremely unlikely. "Preposterous," said Dr. Theory, an elderine who had studied planetary biology for decades. "We've always known that humans are resilient. Their capacity to adapt to a wide range of conditions is well documented. They've colonized planets that most species wouldn't even dare visit. Perhaps we underestimated just how much of that adaptability comes from their origins." "Are you referring to their reckless habit of throwing themselves into dangerous situations and somehow making it through alive?" As RIS continued to scroll through the recently made available data on his holodisplay, he paused to look up at the scholar's room. "They have an unmatched capacity for pain tolerance and immune systems that adapt at a speed we've never seen before." The room went silent, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though the entire Reelan Council was thinking the same unsettling idea. What if the categorization of Earth wasn't incorrect? What if humanity's carelessness was really a strength? Meanwhile, on Drixon 4, a tiny colony world that was mostly populated by gentle Achi species, the news created quite a commotion in the local market square. The Achis were renowned for their peaceful ways and placid temperament, which made their response to Earth's status all the more dramatic. Flavi, a normally calm Acres farmer, screamed Class 13 as he dropped his bundle of red spice. They've been living on a Class 13 death world the entire time. Their neighbor, an elderly Acres named Miluz, nodded slowly in horror, which explains a lot. The way they smile in the face of danger makes it seem like they're not afraid of anything. Now we know why Flavi's eyes widen in realization. They grew up being chased by creatures with more teeth than I have hair on my body. To them, our galaxy must seem like a vacation. The asses weren't the only ones who had panicked interpretations, but Miluz shivered, and we should be cautious around them since we can't predict what they'll do next. The new classification in their war chambers was also noticed by the Cath Syndicate, a military coalition known for its aggressive expansionism. Commander Grek, a hardened veteran with dark green, shimmering scales, narrowed his eyes and stared at the galactic map. Chiari's deep voice reverberated throughout the room. The humans come from the most dangerous planet in the galaxy, and we've been treating them like some sort of primitive oddity. The commander paced the room, his mind racing. The Korth were no strangers to conflict, but this new information about the humans was throwing everything into chaos. They'd always assumed that humanity's success in the galaxy was due to luck or some strange technological advancements, but now it seemed like the humans had been forged in the fires of their planet's endless dangers. Ekra, a younger officer who was one of his advisors, shifted uncomfortably. So, Commander, we've underestimated them. Grek snorted. We've underestimated a lot. Finally, with eyes shining with a fresh feeling of fatigue, Grek said that we must exercise extreme caution if humans are as hazardous as their planet. And so it spread across the galaxy. Others took the news much more seriously, calling councils and military strategists to decide whether humanity posed a threat that had been concealed in plain sight the entire time. Although some species attempted to laugh off the news, unable to reconcile the image of happy coffee-drinking humans with that of the survivors of the deadliest world ever documented, there was one thing that united the entire intergalactic community: confusion. What led to the rallying bed used identically to cry of the baffled. How had these creatures survived? How had they thrived? How had they made their way off such a world and become part of the broader galaxy without anyone realizing the truth? The more the various species thought about it, the more absurd it became. Some even proposed that the humans themselves were unaware of Earth's true classification. After all, how could they know? To them it was just home, just a place where you had to deal with a tornado on your morning commute or fend off a giant bear with claws the size of your head while on a weekend hike. As the disbelief spread, so too did the curiosity. Scientists, explorers, and even military strategists across the galaxy all began to ask the same question: what other secrets were the humans hiding? Because if they could survive a Class 13 death world, who knew what else they were capable of? The Galactic Forum, in all its infinite wisdom, decided that the best way to settle the growing debate over Earth's deadly classification was to organize an official visit to the planet. After all, if Earth truly was a Class 13 death world, then surely a properly equipped diplomatic delegation could verify the situation firsthand. And so, after much deliberation and no small amount of behind-the-scenes betting on how this would all end, the consortium assembled a group of highly esteemed and, more crucially, highly insured representatives, with Ambassador Tharl, a Gorian known for his composed manner and meticulous diplomatic abilities, serving as the mission's leader. As he stood in front of the team, his gelatinous body rippled gently. His 8 eyes scanned the group of chosen envoys. Brixie, a 6-legged Dinari scientist, stood next to him. His expression indicated that he was already regretting his choice to join the mission. Thorl cleared his throat, or at least made a sound that was the Gorian equivalent of that gesture. Our goal is straightforward. After landing on Earth, we will speak with the local government and evaluate the actual state of their surroundings to determine if this Class 13 fatality really occurred. Global categorization is correct. Nervously, Brixie flicked his antenna, raising a clawed palm. What if it's true that the eyeballs blinked in unison? Then, we could watch from a very safe distance. The trip to Earth was surprisingly quick, with the consortium's finest vessel making short work of the interstellar distance. As they approached the planet, The team gathered in the observation bay, staring at the blue and green sphere rotating peacefully below them. "I hope," muttered another team member, Grow, aquarian species known for their extreme risk aversion. Grow was already regretting his decision to volunteer. He had assumed Earth would be one of those cozy, quiet planets with maybe an annoying weather pattern or two in its vicinity. Nervously, Brixie clicked his mandibles and mumbled, "Remember that this is the same world where predators can smash cars with their mouths, so looks may be misleading," Ambassador Thorl said, tilting his head. Predators with jaws trembled, and Grow, who had hoped this was all some clever trick, that struck me as a metaphor before anybody could go into detail about Earth's renowned wildlife. Automated ship systems started as they descended and eventually found themselves landing at a designated spaceport outside of a human city. The environment seemed strangely normal. The air was breathable, the temperature was just slightly higher than usual, and the gravity level unpleasant for some of the cold-blooded species on board. But when they disembarked and set foot on Earth's surface, the planet's real nature gradually became apparent. Their human liaison, a bright-eyed lady called Joanna, smiled broadly to meet them. "Welcome to Earth. We hope your trip wasn't too difficult and have everything ready for you." Joanna shook without hesitation as Ambassador Thorl held out a gelatinous appendage. "Thank you for having us. As you may know, we are here to evaluate the state of your planet." A few of the delegation members shifted uneasily when Joanna smiled and flashed her teeth. "Yes, we have heard that the reclassification is rather drastic, but don't worry, Earth isn't that horrible. We certainly have our share of events, but nothing that a little common sense couldn't manage can stop the crew from exchanging anxious looks. If problems were routine, what horrors were in store for them?" At first glance, their first stop was a city park, a seemingly peaceful area with trees, grass, and people enjoying a sunny day. Birds were chirping overhead, and a few squirrels were darting around foraging, but then things took a turn for the worse when a large dog broke free from its leash and barreled towards the delegation with alarming speed. The dog yelled, scrambled behind Brixie, who had already started working out escape plans. Fortunately, the dog was friendly, stopping just before they arrived and wagging its tail enthusiastically. This is a normal growl, and his limbs shaking as he peeked out from behind the Denari. Joanna raced up and laughed as she grabbed the dog's leash. "Oh, I'm sorry, Rex here just gets excited sometimes." "No harm done, no harm," Growl sputtered, Joanna said, adding that the beast might have eaten us all. Diplomat blinked slowly, suggesting that our risk estimations may need to be adjusted. "Rex wouldn't harm a fly, but I'll confess that some of the wildly can get a little rough." Joanna laughed and rubbed the dog's head. "You should see the alligators down south, Rowdy." "Are they big?" Their Brixie antennas are twitching frantically. Several delegation members prepared themselves as Joanna smiled once again. "Yeah, they can get really big, but as long as you don't go poking around in their swamps, you'll be fine," Joanna said. The group moved cautiously forward, and they visited the seaside as their next destination. The broad, blue ocean seemed to go on forever, but as they stood there taking in the scenery, a huge wave smashed into the beach, sending seaweed and water flying everywhere. "The water is attempting to kill us," he growled, screamed, and flailed as he sought to dodge the approaching spray. Joanna simply shrugged. "No, that's just high tide happens all the time. You get used to it." THL repeated slowly, his eyes reflecting the vastness of the ocean. He had heard stories about Earth's oceans, but experiencing their raw power firsthand was a completely different experience. "Are there creatures in there?" Joanna asked cheerfully. "Sharks,